Hyrule is a land of magic, monsters, and fresh mountain breezes that look like they should come with a stamina boost. Wow, that's beautiful. But just because the air looks crisp doesn't mean it won't unlock the shrine called the Trial of the Lungs. Right behind me is one of the many serene windswept vistas found throughout the Legend of Zelda series. It's beautiful, majestic even, but this same breeze probably just passed through a monster camp right next to a suspiciously glowing pit of gloom.
What's that? Brother, ugh.
So you might think, is this stuff going to make me sick? I mean, look at it. It probably smells like the holiday ham you left in the back of the fridge from last year's holiday. So where exactly is this air coming from? Is it drifting up from Death Mountain? Rolling in from a battlefield full of bokoblin campfires? Or has Link just detonated 6 bomb flowers upwind just for fun? Because here's the thing. Air in real life, it's not always safe. Modern societies spend billions of dollars every year monitoring pollutants, particulates, and gases. So breathing stays a basic function, not an optional side quest. In the past, people mostly relied on wind direction and local knowledge and a whole lot of luck to avoid things like bronchitis and even lung cancer. They were just hoping that their city was not downwind from something unspeakable.
That is one big pile of shit.
But what about in Hyrule? Do they even care about the air quality? Or are the people of Hyrule just breathing in volcanic fumes without a care and developing a horrible cough in their 50s? Well, my wife and I did months of research into air pollution, particulate matter, volcanic emissions, and why that one guy standing next to the campfire for 300 hours straight might be at a higher risk of lung cancer.
I don't know what you mean.
Yikes. All to answer one very important question. Is Hyrule's air actually safe to breathe? But to know that for sure, we had to go on an air quality quest and document every single air system in Hyrule. Across all 8 regions of Hyrule, we tracked volcanic zones, airborne pollutants, temperature shifts, indoor fires, and biological indicators. Basically anything that might tell us whether the air is safe to breathe or not. Now, if you check your weather app as often as my toddler does, which is to say constantly and with great confidence, you probably know that there is an official air quality index issued by the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. It's a 6-tiered system ranging from green all the way down to an ominous dark purple, which looks a lot like gloom. And it factors in a whole mess of important variables: particulates, gases, and how mad the atmosphere is at you for that day.
Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries.
And don't worry, we'll be breaking all of that down as we go. But for now, since Hyrule doesn't exactly have air monitoring stations on every mountaintop, we can't measure this with modern precision. So instead, we're going to combine categories and simplify the scale. For every exploration of Hyrule, we classified each region's air quality as green, which is clean, breathable air, the kind that makes you breathe in deep and hum the overworld theme. Do-do-do-do, do-do-do. I don't know why I did Indiana Jones there. That's not Zelda. You're all gonna hate me in the comments. Yellow, questionable. Probably fine short term, but maybe don't jog here every day. Or red, you should not be breathing this. It's like revving your lawnmower before remembering to open the garage door levels of danger. Trust me, that is not a good plan. By the end of this journey, we'll have a complete visual map of just how healthy or horrifying Hyrule's air actually is. And if you voted in our community poll a few weeks ago, stick around, because at the very end of the video, we'll reveal the safest air in all of Hyrule. And with that all away, let's check out some air. We started our search in Necluda, a region of charming villages, hardworking farmers, and an impressive commitment to feeding the entire continent. Our first stop Why, Hatno Village, of course. Now, if you watched our previous videos, you already know Hatno has a lot going on. In our food episode, we found that most of Hyrule's farming happens right here in Necluda. And in Hatno specifically, that comes with two very important features: windmills and cows. And more accurately, windmills, cows, and a truly enormous amount of cow poop. So what does all that cow poop mean for air quality? Well, not just cows, but all livestock for that matter can have serious negative effects on the air, mostly because of the gases it releases. And we're not talking about long-term theoretical environment effects here. These are the kind of gases that affect you immediately. The main culprit? Ammonia. At high levels of concentrations, ammonia can cause irritation or burns to the skin, eyes, nose, and throat. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Look, I have a 2-year-old. Calm down. It's the kind of thing where if you walk past a manure pit, your body doesn't need a scientific explanation. You just start coughing. And it doesn't stop there. Ammonia doesn't just hang out in the air, it reacts with other gases to form tiny aerosol particles. Think less visible smog and more particles from like a spray can. You might not be able to see them, but you can definitely inhale them. And that's a big problem for breathing because particulate matter can slip deep in your lungs and irritate the tissue there. Breathe that in for a few minutes. Your body might be able to handle it with a cough or two, but if you breathe it in routinely, congratulations, you've just unlocked the chronic lung inflammation achievement. So, do the poop problems stop there? Well, not really. If you remember from our last video, Kakariko Village has some chamber pot solutions for human waste. But Hatno? Hatno is just letting it all run free. And when you have human waste and livestock waste together, you get one unpleasant side effect. That's hydrogen sulfide, a dangerous gas responsible for that classic rotten egg aroma. And it gets worse. Human waste can also release bacteria and viruses into the air, meaning the risk isn't just smell or irritation, it's airborne exposure. So if you're a fan of acute toxicity paired with airborne sickness, Hatno might be the destination for you. But there might be one saving grace here. Remember those windmills? If you've got windmills, theoretically, you've got wind. And wind can actually be a huge win for air quality. Moving air helps carry pollutants like ammonia and hydrogen sulfide away from their source, which is a good thing for the people of Hatno. But for anyone downwind, it's less great. So the real question becomes, is there enough wind to actually offset the pollution in Necluda? Or is this just exporting the problem to the next village over? Sorry, Lurelin. Well, based on what we actually see in game, it looks like the wind might not be doing as much heavy lifting as we hoped. We do spot some bioindicators that we talked about earlier across Necluda, but not very many in Hatno itself. So what is a bioindicator? A bioindicator is a sensitive organism whose presence tells us a lot about environmental health. When these species are thriving, it's usually a good sign that the air or water is in decent shape. And for air quality specifically, we were looking for frogs, dragonflies, and moss. And in the wetlands of East and West Necluda, that's pretty much what we found. Frogs and moss showing up where we expect them. But at least in our time running around, we didn't spot a single dragonfly. That doesn't mean they don't exist there, but it does mean they aren't thriving. And that actually tells us a lot. You see, dragonfly larvae live in the water and are extremely sensitive to pollution and low oxygen levels. When air quality drops, those pollutants don't just stay in the air, they settle into the water. And when that happens, baby dragonflies are usually the first to suffer. So if you're standing in a place where dragonflies should be buzzing and they're not, well, that's a pretty good sign the air and the water aren't in great shape. But what about the towns? Well, they don't look great. In Hotno, we spotted a few trees with moss, but in Kakariko, we found just a single stump. Most of the trees were actually bare. And dragonflies, they were nowhere to be found, even though there's a stream running right through the middle of town. We did find some frogs down in the wells of Hotno, though, but they are hiding out down here with their monster friends. Hi, guys. Good to see you. We know each other from the last video. Turns out they actually do have a permit to live down here. So, pretty bad when the stale monster well air is doing better than the surface. See you guys later. So it seems like open air farming and the wind aren't enough to fully protect Necluda's air quality. And for that reason, we're giving this region a yellow rating. Not exactly ideal if you plan to spend all your days farming outdoors. Or live here if your name is Zelda. Maybe that's why Link moved to Terrytown. I don't know, we'll check them out soon. Now you might be thinking, if you want to see a ton of frogs and dragonflies, you should head south to Faron. So, that's exactly what we did next. And honestly, what we found was quite surprising. This is the Florian Bridge in the southern region of Faron, and it's practically bursting with bioindicators. We have frogs, dragonflies, moss, all signs of good air quality. Up north and east, across the grasslands, the scenery was still gorgeous, but the frogs and dragonflies clearly didn't get the memo over here. And that might be because these animals are tied to water. Dragonfly larvae live in water, and frogs, well, you probably know about tadpoles. Both animals spend their early lives living underwater. But what about as adults? Well, adult dragonflies stick close to water for feeding and breeding. And frogs, they actually, believe it or not, breathe through their skin. So, if their skin dries out, they literally can't breathe. It's like having your lungs out on the sidewalk on a hot summer day, just exposed to whatever's in the air, like all that trash that your disgruntled neighbor is burning in their yard. Definitely not speaking from experience there. And you've got no mucus layer or respiratory defense to help you out. Also, please don't burn trash in your neighborhood. It's not good for the kids next door. And that's exactly why frogs are such good indicators of air quality. But it also means that if you're far away from water, you're less likely to see them, even though the air is otherwise perfect. So where does that leave us for Faron? Well, there aren't any obvious sources of air pollution here, but we're also not seeing a lot of our bioindicators, which is a little strange because this region is the most moist and lush. And that actually might be part of the problem. See, heat and humidity can actually affect air quality. High humidity can increase airborne particulates in the form of pollen and mold spores. Basically, tiny irritants floating around, well, everywhere. And that brings us back to the Air Quality Index, or AQI. See, the AQI measures 6 major factors. 4 of them are gases, and we'll get to those later. But the first 2 are particulate matter. Fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, are particles less than 2.5 microns across, just like the tiny aerosol particles that we saw in Necluda. Coarse particulate matter, or PM10, are anything less than 10 microns across, and that's where pollen and mold come into play. PM 2.5 is more dangerous, and that's because it can penetrate deep into your lungs. But both cause respiratory problems like asthma attacks, bronchitis, and reduced lung function. So, taking a hike in Faron could be a rough day, especially if you're prone to allergies or asthma. But despite that, Faron might be okay. With no obvious sources of pollution, the high humidity alone isn't enough to raise the danger level. If you have allergies like me, maybe stay inside. But otherwise, we're giving Faron a green rating. I mean, my allergies, I think, are oak, and I have dust allergies. So probably not a lot of dust out there. I'll probably be all right. I mean, it's too beautiful. I want to literally live here. So if the humidity is bad, Gerudo Desert then should be great, right? Well, let's find out. Deserts are defined by their extremely low moisture, no rain, and almost zero humidity. And technically, low humidity is good for AQI. Less water means airborne particles don't have anything to stick to. But here's the catch. Dry air isn't necessarily great. Too much dryness can irritate your airways, cause inflammation, and make your lungs feel like you just went 10 rounds with a dust whiz robe. And what's worse, deserts don't just stay dry. They also have sandstorms. Yeah, so that's great. Talk about particulate matter. These storms happen when strong winds lift dust and sand into the air, sometimes sending it thousands of miles away. Dust from one desert can travel across continents and end up somewhere completely different. Not exactly the kind of souvenir you want from your neighbors. And just like other tiny particles, this stuff is terrible for human health. Sandstorms don't just bring sand. They can carry allergens, pathogens, and even heavy metals, all ready to lodge deep in your lungs. Or even worse, sneak into your bloodstream for the full VIP treatment. Luckily, these aren't an everyday event, but when you do head out into the dunes, it's probably wise to cover your face, unless you want to end up looking like a re-dead when you return home.
Anybody got some lotion?
So sandstorms, that's the big villain here, right? Well, probably the most obvious one. But deserts have a few hidden hazards that can make the air even trickier to breathe. One of the sneakiest is temperature inversions. Temperature inversions is where cold air gets trapped under a layer of warm air, along with all those dust and pollutant particles. It's kind of like stepping outside in the desert and suddenly feeling like you're breathing stale air in a dungeon. And that's even with open skies above. So how does that work? Well, the lack of humidity we talk about means that the air can heat and cool really fast. So when the wind is calm and the sun goes down, the air near the ground cools quickly. This effect is especially dramatic in valleys. You know, like a desert surrounded by highlands. The result? The air near the ground ends up colder and more dense than the air above. Basically, upside down compared to normal. Normally, warm air near the ground rises and takes pollutants up to higher levels of the atmosphere. But when cold air is at the ground level, all those dust, sand, and pollutant particles get trapped right where you're taking a breath. When Link is breathing more sand than air, it's not exactly the heroic look he is going for. These temperature inversions also play a big role in ground level ozone. Now, ozone can be a great thing when it's high up in the atmosphere. Up there, it protects us from too much UV radiation. Basically, it's Earth's natural sunscreen. But extreme heat can increase the production of ozone lower down. And when the air gets inverted, all that extra ozone gets pushed down to the breathing level. That's not great. Ozone is actually one of the main ingredients in something called smog. And you guessed it, that means more coughing, more wheezing, and more lung irritation. I suddenly had the desire to go outside and get a breath of fresh air. Breathing in Gerudo Desert might be okay, but if the wind picks up at all or the nighttime cooling brings down too much ozone and sand debris, well, let's just say I am starting to wish they had put a sand resistance mask in this game. So we are giving Gerudo Desert a yellow rating. Unless the wind picks up. In a sandstorm, it's straight to red. That's the angry face on the AQI scale. So next we headed up north to Hebra, hoping to cool down from the desert. Since the rapid cooling and low humidity were so bad for smog formation and temperature inversions, constant cold and snow will be much better, right? Well, not really. See, extreme cold can cause temperatures inversions too. I know, it's a bit weird, but stay with me. So how does that all work? Well, normally the air near the ground is warm, and as the warm air rises, so does the warm air near the ground. And it should be lifting those pollutants away from the breathing level. But when there is a snow-covered ground, it cools the air above really fast, especially at night. Think of it kind of like a glass of water in a cold room. The water is cold, but if I add ice, it gets even colder fast. Even though the room is cold, that glass of water got colder. That means the air near the ground is colder than up above, basically upside down from normal. So when the wind is calm and the air settles into valleys, the warmer air sits on top. That denser, colder air is trapped below, and the warmer air is floating above. And just like the desert, this traps pollutants down below. But in the desert, we had all that sand, heavy metals, and ozone. Are there any pollutants here that could be trapped? Well, luckily for the people of Hebra, not too many. There are campfires scattered around, but probably not enough to affect the overall air quality. Fire can be catastrophic for air quality, releasing toxic gases, ash, and other particulate matter. But that's really only an issue for fires as big as a forest. Or, a gigantic volcano known as Death Mountain. But hold on, don't worry, we'll get there. So small outdoor campfires don't matter too much here. But what about indoor fires? Are the people of Hebra poisoning themselves while they try to keep warm inside? Well, surprisingly, they are actually doing pretty well. We looked for indoor fires in every region, but it turns out, despite all the chimneys, no one has a fire lit, except in Hebra. And luckily, every indoor fire we found had plenty of ventilation. See, wood fires produce a lot of carbon monoxide. It's not a major atmospheric pollutant, but it's very bad news for breathing. Carbon monoxide is especially dangerous because it can replace oxygen in your blood. That's not good. So you feel like you're breathing normally, but your heart and brain are filing a formal complaint, which means that cozy little fire might look relaxing, but stand there too long and suddenly Link isn't running low on stamina. He's just wondering why the world is looking weirdly grayscale. Historically, houses across the world were built with ventilation in mind. Viking longhouses used roof openings called windeyes for ventilation. These allowed smoke from the central hearth to escape while minimizing the cold air entry. Teepees also had a brilliant ventilation system to survive those cold North American winters. They used adjustable smoke flaps at the top for a chimney effect to allow smoke to escape. So Hebra doesn't have any obvious outdoor pollution, and the indoor fires we saw actually are pretty well ventilated. Did we just stumble across the best air in all of Hyrule? Maybe, but there is one place I wouldn't want to hang out for too long up here: the Mushroom Caves. Now, caves full of mushrooms show up in a few regions, but in Hebra, this is where we get the classic mushroom quest that leads you straight into a secret cave at Sternida Springs. And here's the problem. Nature forgot to install a chimney. Low ventilation plus lots of organic material means stale air, spores, and mystery smells. The kind where even Link should think twice before taking a deep heroic inhale. See, mushrooms reproduce by releasing spores, tiny microscopic packets drifting through the air, just looking for a new place to grow and call home. In small amounts, that's normal. But when tons of spores plus some volatile compounds build up in enclosed spaces, say goodbye to your lungs.
Oh no!
And here's the extra kicker. Depending on the species, some mushrooms can also release airborne mycotoxins, literally mushroom-specific toxins. Nothing dramatic, just kind of the air you'd rather not be breathing while trying to solve a puzzle. So overall, Hebra is looking pretty cool. Get it? Cool?
Are you drunk?
Let's move on. As long as we don't linger in the mushroom caves like we're on some sort of guided tour. But does the environment agree with us? Do our bioindicators back that up? Well, yes and no. We wouldn't expect to find many frogs in the snow. That one's fair. But we would expect to see moss. Moss and lichens are major food sources for animals like reindeer and muskox, and they're also great indicators of long-term air quality. See, unlike most plants, moss doesn't have roots. That means it absorbs water and nutrients directly from the air through its leaves. Moss is basically a living sponge, soaking up whatever's floating around in the atmosphere, which makes it an incredibly useful bioindicator, but also a bit sensitive. If the air quality drops, moss is likely to be the first to notice, and the first to disappear. Surprisingly, we only found moss in about half of the places we checked. Around Rito Village and farther north, almost none. But if you head south into the bogs, caves, and up on the Thunder Plateau, and suddenly there's moss everywhere, thriving. Even more surprising, we found a shocking number of dragonflies across Hebra, despite the cold temperatures. That's not normal. So what's our final verdict? What's up everyone, MamaGoron here. One thing I want to point out here specifically is that these dragonflies are not obtainable that I'm approaching here. There are obtainable ones in Hebra for sure, but these specifically, this like group of dragonflies that are flying around, the game is rendering them as a visual, but they're not pickable. Like you can't put them in your inventory, you know what I mean? That is something interesting that Tears of the Kingdom does. Also, two big announcements that I want to go ahead and throw at you guys. One, we are opening up a community Discord. We have seen a ton of folk commenting just awesome like hypotheses and theories and just a ton of facts in our YouTube posts, in our videos, and we just, we've decided like, hey, we got a community here. We're gonna open up a Discord. We're gonna have some discourse, if you will, in the Discord because we really, really enjoy talking to you guys. You guys really make this whole thing so much fun. So we're really excited. Links down in the description if you're interested in joining our Discord and meet really awesome people. Discord I think is really gonna help us grow our community here because we really want to grow this community. And on top of growing the community, it has been 1 year, a whole year of research. You can look at all these videos just scrolling by. We do a ton of research on this channel, and when we first started it, we really had the mindset of, before we even do a sponsor, that we wanted to make sure to prove to all of you that we could do this and that we have a ton of research to back in. And here we are a year later, and I think we're at that point. We're really at the point where we can grow this community. Like I just saw that we passed like 8,000 subs, which is incredible. That is a crazy goal. We're very close to getting like to 10,000. Did not expect that. And so it's at this point that we've decided also to start a Patreon. So if you are really into this content, if you really like us and you want to support the research that we do, the research consultants that we talk to, because we don't just go off of each other. We actually go out and talk to a civil engineer who does water filtration in Ohio. We actually go and talk to somebody that studies frogs and lizards. We actually go talk to those folks because, well, we know them through our jobs. Live streams that we're going to be doing, a Q&A live stream, we can ask us questions, and You can even pass those questions along to research consultants. And if you really want to go above and beyond, you can actually get access to MamaGoron's research notes, where you can literally nerd out as much as you'd like to and read through all of her notes. She actually takes some pretty amazing notes. I think she said that she already has put in the air quality notes, and she's already put in some animal notes in there. Links are down in the description below. Thank you so much for everything, guys. I love you. Back to the video. Green. A happy face with a slightly raised eyebrow pointed north. Still wondering where all that moss decided to go. Ah, Eldin, home. Okay, so I think we all know where this is headed. Volcanoes and air quality are not best friends, which means it's finally time to finish off our AQI hazard list. We've already talked about particulate matter, and don't worry, that's coming back in a big way. But what are the other 4 variables that the AQI measures? Well, those are gases, and volcanoes produce every single one. 2 of these gases we've already mentioned: ozone and carbon monoxide. We already know carbon monoxide is bad news for breathing. But what about ozone? Well, ozone is made of 3 oxygen atoms bounded together, O3. But here's the catch. That's not the kind of oxygen that we breathe. Our lungs are designed specifically for O2, not O3. And that raises an obvious question. If oxygen is good, wouldn't more oxygen be even better? Unfortunately, no. It turns out that extra oxygen in O3 makes it a powerful oxidizing agent. When ozone enters the lungs, it can trigger the formation of highly reactive molecules called free radicals. And that's bad news bears. Free radicals are unstable molecules looking for extra electrons, and they steal those electrons from healthy cells. That chain reaction leads to tissue damage, inflammation, and in more severe or repeated exposures, even damage to DNA. Basically, it's not just irritating your lungs, it's starting tiny chemical sword fights inside of them. So what about the other 2 gases on our list? Well, say hello to sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide, which sound like they're about to ruin your day. First up, sulfur dioxide. That's the one responsible for that familiar rotten egg smell we noticed back in Hotno. Breathe in enough of it, and it can tighten your airways, leading to shortness of breath, bronchitis, and even long-term heart issues. So if the air smells like breakfast gone wrong, or your 1-year-old just filled their diaper, your lungs are already filing paperwork to leave. Then there's nitrogen dioxide, a major contributor to acid rain and a fast mover in the chemistry world. It reacts quickly in sunlight to help form ozone and smog, basically showing up and immediately making friends with the worst elements in the room. And just to really round things out, both of these gases can react in the atmosphere to form fine particulate matter, which means even more tiny particles that your lungs did not invite to the party. I mean, no wonder the AQI guy looks so stressed. He knows what's on the menu. So now we know everything that the AQI measures. But what does that have to do with volcanoes? Well, active volcanoes, or even quiet ones, are basically tiny pollution factories. They constantly release gases and particles and particulates, whether they are erupting or not. The main troublemaker is sulfur dioxide and fine particulate matter. They also sneak in nitrogen dioxide and carbon monoxide in smaller amounts. And of course, the nitrogen dioxide doesn't just sit there. It jumps into the chemical party to form ground-level ozone and smog. Even when Death Mountain is just chilling, these gases can travel tens of kilometers. And when it's actually erupting, the pollution spreads thousands of miles. So yeah, Link better stock up on his new cola if he wants to survive the fallout. And we would like to say that that's the only problem with living on Death Mountain, but if you watched our water video, you know the Gorons are making their own mess too. See, the Gorons are also mining and smelting. Mining, even just with a pickaxe, kicks up clouds of dust. Everything in the rock gets pulverized. Coal, heavy metals, sulfur, and that goes straight into your lungs. Ventilation? Practically non-existent. I don't know about you, but I don't like to inhale my rock roasts. And that's why, back in the day, coal miners used canaries. They would use them as their own tiny feathery bioindicators. If the canary stopped singing, well, that's basically get the flip out of there alarm. And what about the material that comes out of those mines? Well, obviously we know where rock roasts end up, but Gorons are also blacksmithing, which means they must be mining out metal ore and purifying it. And yeah, that can be rough on air quality. Smelting, which is heating ore to extract pure metal, can release toxic heavy metals like lead, arsenic, and mercury. And then there's sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and even more particulate matter. Blacksmithing, not much better. Tiny metal particles flying into the air along with smoke, gases from the fire. Not exactly the kind of thing you want to go do all day without a mask. So if you do blacksmithing, maybe take some breaks. But at Hyrule's scale, fortunately, it's more of an artisan hobby than a regional air crisis. I mean, unless they had like 100 Gorons blacksmithing, maybe then Zelda would put a repair system in their games. But what about off the mountain? Are there other areas of Eldin that are any better? Well, the Lost Woods isn't looking so great these days. The area is blanketed in thick fog. Not a problem on its own, but water sticks to everything, including all the pollutants drifting down from Death Mountain. No wonder all the trees here are dead. So Eldin is looking pretty rough. But what about our bioindicators? Well, prepare yourself, because we found absolutely nothing. No moss, no frogs, no dragonflies, not even lichens, except for, well, the ones on the Sky Island rocks that fall down occasionally. And yes, we checked. They fall with the lichen already on them. So unless you're a magical Korok dancing around the Deku tree and hoarding all the frogs and moss for yourself, I strongly recommend staying out of the Lost Woods and staying indoors. So yeah, that's a solid rating from us for Eldin. Angry face. Next, we made our way over to Akkala, hoping for a breath of fresh air. And honestly, that turned out to be a pretty good call. For the most part, Akkala is, well, quiet, peaceful, full of trees and natural beauty. Sure, on a windy day, a little ash might drift down from Death Mountain, but it's nothing like the chaos to the west. It's also not too hot or humid here, so we don't have to worry about the ozone problems. It's not cold enough to trap all the air in temperature inversions. So basically, Akkala seems like an air quality sweet spot. A rare place in Hyrule where you can go and actually take a deep breath without wondering if it's going to cost you some HP. But surprisingly, the bioindicators don't back that up. We searched high and low for frogs and dragonflies and found 0. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't any at all, but it does mean they definitely don't have a huge thriving population here. In Moss, we only spot it at the Spring of Power and the construction site, which is a bit ironic. The construction site is probably the only real source of pollution in the entire region, other than, of course, being perched right next to an active volcano. But understanding the construction site in Akkala can be a bit tricky. See, in the real world, modern house construction means diesel engines, giant diggers, chemical insulation, and exhaust. Basically, a fun party for your lungs. Back in the day, The biggest pollutants were probably just dust and saw dirt.
Huh?
Just dust and saw dirt, yeah. Back in the day, the biggest pollutants were probably just sawdust and dirt. But what about in Hyrule? Well, Link is tossing around a suspicious number of Zonai devices, and figuring out how those things work is honestly a whole other video. For now, let's just say there's probably sawdust, maybe a whiff of mortar or glue fumes, and almost certainly some rogue gases from Zonai fans and rockets flying everywhere. You can't tell me that rocket fumes is not bad for breathing, but it's all bad for immediate breathing. It settles quickly and doesn't travel far, unlike Link's attempt at cooking fish. Those smells linger for days. So where does that leave us? At first, we were thinking green, but the scarcity of strong bioindicators have us questioning some things. And then we remembered something important. Volcanic gases don't stay put. Active volcanoes, even when they aren't erupting, are constantly degassing. Think of it like unrolling one of those vacuum-sealed mattresses. It's not exploding, but it's absolutely releasing some questionable fumes. Volcanoes work the same way. They're always slowly venting built-up gases, which means airborne toxins and fine particles can travel way farther than you'd expect. Combine that with a little wind, and the problems in Akkala start to make sense. The highest danger of exposure and suffocation is within 20 miles of the vent. That's the opening of the volcano. But even 60 miles away, sulfur dioxide can react with oxygen and sunlight to form sulfate aerosols, creating a hazy volcanic pollution known as fog. Nothing says outdoor adventure quite like aerosolized rotten eggs. Yum. And on top of that, sulfur dioxide can react with the water in the air and form acid rain, sometimes hundreds of miles away from the volcano itself. So even though Akkala isn't generating much pollution on its own, its upwind neighbor is doing it absolutely no favors. Which means we're waving the yellow flag here. It's tentative. Hyrule's wind usually does a good job moving things along, but in this case, Akkala is stuck holding the short straw. Next, we headed south into Lanayru, and honestly, we were optimistic. Lanayru looks a lot like Akkala, wide, open wilderness, plenty of green, and more importantly, a little more distance from Death Mountain. And on top of that, Lanayru has a bit of a secret weapon. Even though it's getting warmer and more humid as we head south, any pollution that does get trapped here by the humidity doesn't get to hang around for very long. Why is that? Well, the wetlands. If you remember from our water video, we discussed how wetlands are basically nature's industrial-grade water filter. They trap pollutants, break them down, and quietly clean up the muck coming down from the monster camps and volcanoes. The plants and soil in the wetlands physically filter particulate matter out of the air, and they trap gases and pollutants in the water before those contaminants can get kicked back up and breathed in. But they're not done. Wetlands also help regulate local air temperature. All those plants release water vapor, kind of like the plants are sweating. And when that moisture evaporates, it cools the surrounding air. That process is called evapotranspiration. And it's a huge reason Lanayru's air stays cooler, cleaner, and way more breathable than you'd expect for a warm, humid region. In short, Lanayru didn't just roll good stats. It invested heavily into natural air conditioning and pollution control. So that's it. Is Lanayru a bastion of clean air? Well, the bioindicators would say yes. We found moss almost everywhere we looked. We also found an abundance of ferns, frogs, and dragonflies. It's all looking up for Lanayru. it's getting a solid green rating from us. And with that, we turned our eyes to the center of the kingdom, the heart of the country, a region surrounded by deserts, farms, and volcanoes, and full of gloom. Well, let's get through this. So what is gloom, and how badly is it messing with the air? Well, we don't have a full answer yet. Gloom could be standing in for a whole cocktail of real-world toxins, and honestly, that's a whole video by itself. But here's what we do know. Gloom is black, it's thick, and it poisons people just by being nearby. And crucially, it breaks down in sunlight. And that last part is our biggest clue. If a substance becomes less toxic after exposure to light, that means it undergoes photodegradation. Basically, sunlight breaks it down into smaller, less harmful chemicals. And in the real world, that's something we see with compounds like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. They're dark, sticky, toxic, and commonly produced by things like fires, volcanoes, and other kinds of combustion. While these compounds can come from small sources like your neighbor's cooking fire or trash fire, they're most famously found in oil spills or leftovers from burning coal and other fossil fuels. So while we can't say gloom is a PAH, it's definitely wearing the same villain outfit. So basically, you can think of gloom as one big old oil spill all over Hyrule. Yeah, that's not exactly the fresh mountain air you were hoping for. When PAHs get airborne, they hitch a ride on water vapor and fine particles, and sneak deep into your lungs like uninvited guests in the Yiga clan's hideout. Many PAHs are classified as carcinogens, which means they don't just crash your lungs, they can mess with your immune system, your reproductive system, and even your nervous system. Short-term exposure, expect eye irritation and maybe some wheezing. But long-term exposure, well, say goodbye to your liver and kidneys. But what about before there was gloom? What else is brewing in Central Hyrule? Well, we're confidently in the range of the dust in from Gerudo sandstorms, and definitely downwind from the volcano fallout of Death Mountain. And if the wind decides to blow from the southeast, you guessed it, poop wind. Yeah, that's actually a thing. So yeah, Central Hyrule isn't exactly winning freshest air of the year, but you know what time it is. Our final test, bioindicators. And what we found honestly surprised us. We started up in the highlands, cold, exposed, and right in the path of those desert dust storms, and found nothing. No moss, not a frog, or even a hint of a dragonfly in sight. But as we moved downhill, life started showing up. Hyrule Field, well, there was moss and frogs. And Castletown and Lookout Landing, few dragonflies buzzing around. Across the southern regions, we saw more moss and occasionally dragonflies making an appearance. And the kicker, the most surprising discovery of all, Hyrule Castle itself is basically a moss palace. Everywhere we looked, you could find moss. But maybe that's not so surprising. Frogs and dragonflies, they can just hop or buzz south to escape the worst of the gloom. But moss? Not so lucky. It's stuck right where it is. And when the gloom rolls in, moss doesn't just vanish overnight. So how's Central Hyrule's air right now? Well, it's really bad. It's going to get a red flag. But in the past, it might have been a different story. Take away the gloom and the roving monsters, and Hyrule actually wasn't such a terrible place to take a deep breath. Depending on the wind direction, it might even have been green. And so that's it. We've officially investigated all the regions of Hyrule. And wow, that was a bumpy ride. We found some truly awful places and some surprisingly nice ones too. Honestly, I think Lanayru could make a fortune building a wetland resort. I'd stay there, just maybe slip me a margarita or two. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. But hey, let's check on that poll from a few weeks ago and see what you all thought was the best place to get a deep breath of air. All right, let's see how we did. I have my computer here to check it out. Okay, wow. Well, I'm just gonna say it. I think all of you would survive. From the results here, it really does seem like you guys know not to go Central Hyrule. I mean, look at Central Hyrule. 1%. I don't know who. We had over 100 people put in votes. You know, our last poll was like I think we had maybe like 50 in that. So this is a double amount, and 1%. So that's good. I'm glad that people said Central Hyrule was not the place to get fresh air. Also, Eldin, no, great place. Good. You guys are so good, and a ton of you, almost 50%. We're at 43%. Said Hebra was the place to go, and I have to say, if I was going to go anywhere, I think Hebra would be it. So, who has the best air in Hyrule? Is it the mountains of Hebra or the wetlands of Lanayru? And who has the worst? Let us know down in the comments below what you think. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe. Maybe check out the Patreon and stay healthy out there. My name is MamaGoron. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.
Where have you been? Been searching all along. Keep facing twilight on and on without a clue.
Okay, so like, this is normally where I would put a funny reveal for the next video. But I'm going to be real with all of you for a minute. When I get footage for these videos, I do it all myself. I fly around to get all that amazing footage. And here's the thing. Every time I go to get some really good, spicy footage, I set myself up for the perfect shot. Light piercing through the clouds. Angels singing. It's so beautiful, you thought you could get married here. And then it starts to rain. Every single time it starts raining. And it could be the most perfect footage, but it's ruined by the rain. And it happens way more often than you think. So, we are going to take all of this trauma and turn it into a video. We are going to find out once and for all, how often does it rain in Hyrule? Because I think it rains way too much. It ruins my footage and probably causes some flooding. So buckle up, because we are going to legitimately do a randomized scientific study of how often it rains in Hyrule. Also, it might be a study of what happens when Link gets struck by lightning, because that happens to me more often than I'd like to admit.
I'm a shapeshifter. What else should I be? Please don't take off my mask, revealing